possibly one of our most exciting IPAs that we've got on the books at the moment. All Swedish ingredients IPA, or almost all Swedish ingredients. The showcase of this one is actually all Swedish hops. So we were contacted by a man called Kalle from Horröds Humle. He sent us a small sample of his Comet that he'd been growing in Skåne. We've tried Swedish hops before and had very interesting results, but this Comet he sent us we thought were absolutely fantastic. So we had a chat and we bought a lot and invited him over to actually brew a beer together and chat a bit more about Swedish hops and growing Swedish hops as well, because that's it's of big importance, not just to us. I mean, we mainly use a lot of ingredients that aren't from Sweden. Like when you look at most of our beers, very little of our malt comes from Sweden, very little of our hops come from Sweden, and we kind of asked ourselves why. I mean, the main reason why is there is not as much production of these ingredients in Sweden, so you have to look elsewhere. However, do we want to just accept that that's how we're doing things from here on? We're not gonna try, we're not gonna help, we're not gonna encourage growth of these components within Sweden. And given what we've got in my hand here, and there's not much of these, because for us, we could only brew one beer with all the hops he had, so we're going to make sure it's a good one. The interesting thing that loads of people have just kind of grown hops in Sweden by just taking hops from somewhere else and growing it in Sweden. But if we know anything about growing specialist things like hops or like grapes, regions grow grapes because of what grew best there, for the soil, for the terroir, all these bits and pieces. Why would we just take something from South Germany and plop it in Sweden? Why would we just take something from the US and plop it in Sweden? Kalle from Horröds Humle, however, has been looking at what actually grows well in Sweden. So he's got some old school Swedish varieties that we're going to be playing around with in the future, along with he actually managed to do his research, look around and found that Comet, which is not a classic favorite of many people, however, it's an underrated hop. It's got really good characteristics to it, like it's fruity, it's spicy, it's a bit piney. It's like, I think for most people, Simcoe. Simcoe has got that fruity punch, the piney aspect, and it's great, but it's just very forgotten, left behind. But he found that it grows really well in Sweden and has grown some really fantastic Comet, and so we decided to do an all Swedish, well no, it was almost all Swedish malt. They didn't have enough, so we had to supplement it a little bit, but almost entirely Swedish malt, all Swedish hops for certain, to show that we can make a beer just as good as exciting rather than having to import all those ingredients. We'll obviously continue using Citra Mosaic from the US in lots of our beers, but we believe, and I believe, there's room to have more Swedish ingredients. Use more Swedish malt, use more Swedish hops, but I expect that we can make beers of good quality, of equal quality, rather than trying to chase. We're not trying to grow Citra and make a New England IPA in Sweden. We're trying to make we're going to grow a hop that's just as good as Citra and make a beer that fits that kind of hop, is what we're kind of more going for. I mean, for this particular beer, it worked out really well that a good old school West Coast IPA really fits with what we've got in my hand here. Like this Swedish Comet, for us, it was like the first thing when we smelt it was like, oh, that would be deadly in a good old school West Coast IPA. Not a real caramelly one, not a real dark, we're not talking the copper amber color. We're thinking beautiful beach, light bright yellow, zesty, bit bitey with some bitterness, but not too much. and then you've got pine and the lemon zesty character all over the top, and something that's just delightful and drinkable. But that's this Comet. We also have Kosta and Hura Nora Norgård. You see, the Hula Norgård, those two hops definitely had a bit more like piney, noble characteristics, but still like a bright, zesty character. And like that, for me, that kind of beer would be, for what many people call the Italian Pilsner, like a more hoppy lager. But then, well, we could make a lager with, we could do all Swedish malt again. There's some lovely Pilsner malt that's grown in this country. Use this hop, and we don't have to call it this beer or that beer. It could be, hey, here's a beer we made that's got a lovely fruity characteristic while still being quite clean and crisp. It's very drinkable. If it helps you to know what style it is, sure, it's something on the form of like an Italian style Pilsner, but what it is it's more interesting than your average beer, but still very drinkable, would be kind of what I would do with some of the other hops we've got. Or we could also go for like a real classic pale ale, like a European style pale ale. Again, drinkable, easy, interesting. That's the thing, it doesn't have to be like blow your head off with hop character. It just has to be enjoyable. I mean, for me, what my dad always said to me, which it's funny because now I'm completely in agreement with him, but when I first got into drinking beer, and his favorite beer, which is now my favorite beer, was the old Best Bitter at the pub. And I was there with my IPA and stuff, and I was like, oh, look at the smell of it. Oh, Dad, smell this, it's great. And he was like, oh, yeah, that's fun, but the best beer, he was like, that's good, but that's not the best beer. And I was like, yeah, this is way better than what you're drinking. I'm like, no. What he said to me is the best beer is interesting enough that you keep wanting to having a sip, but not so much that you have to start bothering everyone on the table about it. That's the best beer. And that, I agree now, is the best beer. I think the beer that you want to keep drinking, but you don't have to annoy people about it. Big, because this is a punchy hop. We don't have to go for a lager or something easy. It needs to be big. Don't want it to be over the top though. We want it crisp. We want this hop to do all the talking. So it's got crisp, easy, simplistic on the malt front. But then, I mean, when we're adding the hops to the boil, every time we open that bag, I got a real whiff of lemon verber. So I'm really hoping for something that's like lemony, citrusy, but it's still a bit spicy, a little bit piney and resinous. And we bittered it up just to the point that it should have a nice bite to it, but it's not going to be like drying your mouth out with, 100 IBU or any of this kind of ridiculousness. It's just going to be something that's big, interesting, light bright yellow, zesty, bit bitey with some bitterness, but not too much. And then you've got pine and the lemon zesty character all over the top, and something that's just delightful and drinkable.